What's up, team? Hey, I'm really fired up about this show. I got to tell you, I've been waiting to do this for a long time, really since the last incredible show I did with Dr. Frueh from the University of Hawaii, also from the Synchrony Program, which is run out of Methodist Hospital in Houston, and a very close personal friend, and as well as my psychologist. This is a guy that has treated well over 50 operators from every different unit, from every different level, as well as the intelligence world. And if you paid attention to our first show, where we really began to scratch the surface on a concept that everybody that's ever served in special operations should come to understand and appreciate and know. And those of us who are battling with a lot of this stuff, we have come to know it intimately well. And finally, we finally have a term for it that will, we believe, Chris and I believe, will begin to really enable all healthcare providers, all treatment facilities, all psychologists, doctors, orthopedics, HBOT specialists, you name it, anybody that is dedicated towards serving and helping operators, special operations force members who are battling with a whole slew of issues and challenges. Man, this show is for you. Now, what Chris and I are going to do is we're going to cover this incredible paper that he recently published along with Dr. Alok Madan, J. Christopher Fowler, Sasha Stromberg, Major Bradshaw, Karen Kelly, Benjamin Weinstein, Morgan Luttrell, Summer G. Danner, and Deborah C. Bidell. And what it's called is Operator Syndrome, a unique constellation of medical and behavioral healthcare needs for military special operations forces. Now, this paper was posted a few weeks ago and has already been seen by over 8,000 people around the country. And it's my duty, not only as a participant in helping Chris come up and deliver this paper effectively, but also my duty as a member of on the consultants board of the Synchrony Program, really to bring this issue to light, to really shine, to help people see what operator syndrome is exactly and how it breaks down in order to better serve all my brothers and sisters out there that are struggling with these different types of medical and behavioral health issues. So please, I hope you pay close attention. Listen closely to as we break down this paper, and for all my brothers and sisters struggling, this one's for you. I love you a ton. Thank you. My brother. What's going on, buddy?
My man. How are you doing today?
I am above dirt and nobody's shooting at me. And I have one of my favorite people in the whole wide world on the show with me. And so my life is pretty awesome right now. How about you?
I'm glorious. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on again.
Well, as you know, the response we got from our last show was pretty substantial. I think we're now up to something like 20,000 downloads on it. And you and I both know it was spread all across the community and out and amongst other communities within the special operations world, the intelligence world. So, I think the feedback that I got was, hey, we want to know more about what operator syndrome is. And so, man, here we go. All right. Now, you just recently wrote this beautiful paper along with several other folks, and it's called Operator Syndrome, a unique constellation of medical and behavioral health care needs for military special operations forces. First off, why don't you tell our listeners why you wrote it, where it came from, and what you hope to accomplish with it?
Well, so as you know, Dave, I'm a I'm a clinical psychologist and I do clinical work, but I've also spent 25, 30 years doing research with veterans and military personnel. So everything I do, I always think about, it's not just how can I help the man in front of me or the woman in front of me, but how can I gather information and share that with the broader community so that to be able to help more people. And so this paper really is something that's been in the works for 6 or 7 years. Did not start as the intent of, hey, let's go write a cool paper. This was about a year or two into some activities going, you know what, we're seeing something here that's unusual, unexpected. Why do these guys who are 35, 40 years old have low testosterone? You know, they're big, strong, tough guys. You don't expect that. Why do they have sleep apnea? That's weird. It's unexpected. So in the course of seeing this pattern over and over and over again, started having conversations with colleagues and with some of the folks that are listed as co-authors here, and many folks who aren't listed as co-authors, partly because of their military service connections, not being able to be a part of this, and realized, you know, we need to put this out there. And so a lot of this just came about as my effort to understand what I was seeing, conversations with you about what you are aware of over and over and over again among your friends and comrades. And originally I put together just like a little white paper for myself that I started sharing with the guys and the gals that I was talking with. And in the course of doing that, got a lot of feedback. And then it was like, you know what? This is a paper. This is something we need to share with the world. Let's get this out there. So this paper, I mean, it's in a scientific journal, and I'm a scientist. I would describe the methodology of this paper as very qualitative. I mean, it's an observational study, and it's a study of something that I've seen, just a pattern I've seen over and over and over again in the special operation community, and I've never seen it anywhere else.
It really is kind of the anomaly. And what's interesting is, you know, everybody's so mainly focused right now on PTSD, right? And this dates back all the way back, to, Homer and the Iliad and the descriptive terms that have been around in terms of battle exhaustion, shell shock, soldier's heart, battle fatigue, war neurosis, right? But I think what's really unique about now and what we're seeing is that the combination of where our society has evolved to, right? And then you mesh that with the intense immersive selection process of our core training, and then the extensive nature of combat over the last 19 years, you're really getting this pretty substantial, dynamic multitude of issues that are compiling on these. I love the term you had in there, cascading, right? On the individual to really affect what you call the allostatic load. When did, and just so everybody knows, I've been working with Chris for years on my stuff. I've pushed multiple friends to him. Chris, why don't you talk a little bit about when you started first working with special operations guys from, a clinical or just, a pro bono perspective, and when you started to see these signs and symptoms really begin to elevate your awareness of these patterns?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably about a decade ago, and it was just probably a gradual movement, one or two guys here and there, and then, snowballed. That's actually a scientific term, snowball. You talk to one guy and they send you somebody else, and then they send you two people, and, it rolls from there. And so that's been kind of my experience. This paper itself was written probably a year ago. It just takes a while to get, out. And what's sort of not really represented in this paper is that there's probably now 60, 70 people I've talked with intimately on multiple occasions. But over and above that, I've also had extensive conversations with care providers, psychologists, internal medicine doctors, physical therapists, speech pathologists, psychiatrists, social workers who work inside naval special warfare, who are stationed at Fort Bragg and around the country at other Army bases. I've talked with a small number of VA care providers around the country. In fact, after our last podcast, I got a call from a surgeon at the VA, at a VA out in the mountain time zone, who was saying to me, she was expressing gratitude. She said, "This makes sense. This explains what she's been seeing." Now, she said she's a surgeon who does breast reduction surgeries on veterans. And she said, that's one of the unfortunate results of having years of low testosterone is breast enlargement in men. Wow. And she said what she's seen is like the VA won't treat it. The VA doesn't even want to acknowledge or evaluate it for the most part. Wow. And so she says, I've got these guys in my office who are crying, about the loss of what they perceive the loss of their manhood. And it's just heartbreaking. And she said when she listened to our first podcast, she just had tears in her eyes, and she shared that with every one of those guys. I sent her this paper over the weekend, and last weekend, and she responded back. She's going to share it with every one of her patients now that she's seeing in that context, and share it back to the urologists and primary care docs around at her VA.
Well, so it's really picking up steam. I mean, now I think what's so amazing about what's happening, and as you and I have been discussing for years now, is everybody wants somehow things to be in this nice, concise package, right? We want the easiest way to digest information.
PTSD.
Yeah.
PTSD is the catchphrase that just kind of gets hung on everybody who goes into a VA clinic with any kind of psychological problem. Yep. If they have combat experience.
And it's just, and the inadequacies of those diagnoses and you and I have chatted extensively about my 100%. Experience in the VA and the 4 years it took to be effectively evaluated. And, and I always like to share my first foray, my first, real series of visits with doctors. I met about 8 doctors, and 6 of which had never even heard or knew what a Navy SEAL was, much less trying to understand the totality of what it means to go through a breacher's course, or what it means to carry a boat on your head for 5 straight days.
So let's start with that. Let's talk a little bit about what's happened over the last 20 years in terms of the historical perspective, and then in terms of what that means for the individual operators.
Perfect.
I don't think people understand this. I don't think your average civilian, your average doctor, your average psychologist, even folks in the VA don't understand how the difference of what our special operation forces have done for the last 20 years. What I have seen and what I know is there are people who have spent 15 years, 20 years at war. We have not had that in our straight. Yeah. I mean, there are training evolutions that are done stateside, obviously, but even those are intense. And all of that is about prepping for the next combat mission. And so that right there, you have something that nobody understands. The other thing you've got is a failure to understand the intensity of the training. And I've used, in my paper, I use the term allostatic load. And let me define that, because it's pertinent right here. And it's generally a concept. Allostatic load is a concept. It's not a specific, number or metric. It's a concept that says all of the burden on the body and the brain and the health and the psyche and the spirit, all of that coming together. And so when we think about the training for special operations, let's hold off on combat. How many charges do you blow in a breacher course?
Oh my God. I mean, the breacher course I went to is a little over 2.5 weeks long. We did, I don't even know. We did like 4 days of door breaches, shotgun breaches, And then we started in doing bigger, more substantial breaching charges. So, I mean, you could be exposed or within the vicinity of, I don't know, 100, 200 different breaches from all the different guys going through it.
So right there, if you stop right there, you've got a massive dose of blast wave exposure that is so far beyond anything that typical conventional forces and certainly civilians will ever experience cumulative in their entire life. And when we get into the TBI section, we can talk about the difference between impact forces that cause concussions and the effects of blast wave exposure, which are a shearing force that goes through the soft tissue of the body. So, there's different kinds of damage occurring here. So even firing a rifle or a handgun has a small dose that contributes. How many times have you pulled the trigger?
And if you're talking about heavy caliber weapons, I mean, I remember in my first platoon,
rockets.
When we would do IADs or immediate action drills, I would be sandwiched between two M60 machine guns, right? And over the course of a 9-10 hour period, these guys are shooting 4,000 to 7,000 rounds per shooter, and I'm right in the middle of that.
Yeah, it's incredible. How many trigger pulls in your career?
Oh, it's impossible.
What's the average?
Over 1 million. I mean, absolutely. I mean, there's
Say that again.
Over 1 million.
Say that again.
Oh, guys that are in the teams for 20 plus years, way over 1 million rounds shooting by far.
Yeah.
I mean, it's insane the amount of it.
So let all of this sink in for a minute and then think about what most other people have. I mean, even somebody who's a recreational shooter or a hunter, probably not over several thousand unless they're really avid. So we're talking about a dose here that's just incredible. And then you add on to that the running, the marching, the rucking, the jumping, the rappelling, the jumps out of airplanes, the running with a boat on top of your head, the time spent underwater. Diving is not a simple, easy thing on the brain or the body either. So we're talking about just an incredible dose of wear and tear on every part of your being.
And the one that I think is really a profound effect is the emotional load that you take and that you have to endure as well, because no other place in life is the peer evaluation and the peer pressure and then also the emotional requirements in order to live in a place of that moral ambiguity, of that drive to want to go to war. And if you don't display that, if you don't have that, then you risk the potentiality of being ostracized from this elite culture that you've literally put your life on the line to try and be a part of.
Yep.
All right. I just want to start out with this section. Before we jump into the paper, I just want to read, and this is in the results section. And let me just read this real fast. We identified a consistent pattern of healthcare difficulties within the Special Operations Forces community that we and other Special Operations Force healthcare providers have termed, in quotations, operator syndrome. This includes interrelated health and functional impairments, including traumatic brain injury effects, endocrine dysfunction, sleep disturbance, obstructive sleep apnea, chronic joint and back pain, orthopedic problems and headaches, substance abuse, depression and suicide, anger, worry, rumination, and stress reactivity, marital, family, and community dysfunction, problems with sexual health and intimacy, or being on guard or hyper-vigilant, memory, concentration, and cognitive impairments, vestibular and vision impairments, challenges of the transition from military to civilian life, and common existential issues. I love how you guys threw in that last little sprinkling of existential issues. Thank you for adding that one in there. I'm glad you put that in. That's a pretty extensive list, Chris.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. And there's probably more things in there that we didn't think of. Some folks have recently pointed out to me the heavy metal exposure is a significant concern. The dietary, eating weird food in like those, I don't know what kind of packaged processed foods you guys carried, but that's something that some people have wondered
You've
about.
got the burn pits. You've got, I mean, just to go back to the heavy metals thing, man. I remember my first platoon. There was some concerns about lead exposure, and we wore these little lead detectors. We called them fart sniffers, right? And they were annoying as hell, but we had to wear them for a whole 3 weeks up at Camp Pendleton at the kill house up there. And remember, we'd put these, and we'd get these test people that would come in, and they would say, this is more lead exposure than anybody we've tested. And because if you're in this contained house, you're shooting hundreds, if not thousands of rounds a day in this house, and you're just breathing this stuff in. And that was just 1 3-week period. And now you put in a guy that's been in 20 plus years, and the exposure, I mean, it's really a phenomenon that more of us don't have much more significant issues than I guess is being the data that's available.
Right. And then let me add one other thing, which I didn't think about when I was writing this paper, but it's been something that's been on my mind the last few weeks. Most humans, most people have a point at which they tap out. They say, no mas, I'm done. I gotta step away. I'm hurting. What I've seen and thought about is that guys from the special operator community don't tap out. Doesn't matter how bad they're hurting, what's broken, what's not working. They push through all that pain and they keep going. And pain is a signal. Pain is something that is supposed to be there to tell us, hey, take your hand off the stove. Your hand is getting burned because the stove is on. And you go, whoa, take my hand away, and that protects the tissue on your hand. And special operation guys are known for pushing through that pain.
Oh,
so the damage that accumulates from that.
Well, in our world, from day one, from the first, but not even the day one where you enter the program, where you're actually going through that cognitive rehabilitation, let's call it. You're even before that, when you're the kid and you're reading the books, or you're watching the movies, you're watching Lone Survivor, American Sniper, you're reading all the books, you're reading Fearless, the Adam Brown story, and Adam loses an eye and still completes sniper school. Adam has his fingers ripped off his hand, and he still goes through Green Team and goes over to Dev Group, right? And these stories, these are fantastic stories for sure, but how many guys have you talked to from across the community that all have these intense stories where they're not going to allow those signals, those very clear-cut signals that are designed to reduce the allostatic load on us and all these capacities, and you just blow them off because you don't want to be evaluated as weak in any capacity.
Right.
Well, so the one of the things that when I got into this, and I really appreciated the description, right? The nature of service includes years away from spouses and family, physical danger, death of friends and comrades in training and combat and training injuries, acute and chronic, both including concussive impact injuries, blast wave exposure, and the cause traumatic brain injuries, and the existential and psychological damage involved as well too. I really appreciated that section and why you put that in there, because I think when people see the other things and you start to really hear the extensive nature of all the issues, people are starting to go, whoa, so this isn't just a combat thing. This isn't just happening when you're downrange. The majority of this is happening in your training cycles, your workups, and the perpetual nature of
right.
just that you train like you fight. And I think that's a powerful tool for you guys in this.
Yep. Agree.
Now,
What's the saying? You can bleed in war or you can bleed in training.
100%, and that's been the case in our communities as far back as some type of special units were involved. Counter guerrilla units of the Civil War, the special reconnaissance teams of World War I, and then certainly in World War II, the OSS units, all these the Rangers, all these really unique units that were out there in this perpetual state of hypervigilance and exposure to all these very damaging things. Now, the next thing what I'd like to do now, Chris, if we could, is let's just start out with the first thing that you guys have listed. And if you could just talk a little bit about the effects of traumatic brain injury and what you guys have seen and what you've heard from this paper.
Sure. So, and just to, at the outset, just to say, the order of these components, these health components, is intentional. So in my view, we really need to start with the traumatic brain injury. And the word that effects are in there is because it's not just the traumatic brain injury alone, it's the effects, it's the cascade of what comes from that. So many of the things that are down the list in this paper are partial or major effects from the TBI. We don't understand TBI very well. We don't. We have the concept of concussions. We've had that for a long time. So that's an impact force. We understand that impact forces. So
right?
Yeah, football players, people thrown off a horse, boxers, rugby players, soccer players heading the ball.
And that's the CTE stuff, right?
Automobile accidents. Well, that can lead to chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, which is really a new discovery. I mean, it's really the last 10 years or so that's been understood, and we still don't understand it very well. And the only way we can truly diagnose that is at postmortem. So we can look for signs and cues when somebody's alive, but we can't know for sure until after they're dead and do an autopsy on the brain. When a veteran goes into the VA and says, "Oh, I have a TBI, I think I have a TBI, or I think I had a TBI," one of the primary questions that the VA asks, and that most doctors ask, is, "Oh, well, how many times have you been knocked unconscious?" Okay, right there. Let's pause right there. How many times have I been knocked unconscious? Well, we're talking about guys that were athletes in high school. So usually, oftentimes, there's one or two or three there. Then there's maybe one or two times in training, one or two times in combat. Okay, so let's call it 4, 5, 6, 10. I don't know. But really unconscious? Like, how many times have you had your bell rung, but not unconscious? That's another number. How many times? And then they say, how long were you unconscious? I don't know. I was unconscious. How can I know how long I was unconscious? Maybe somebody else timed it. But usually when those things happen, other people are busy and preoccupied themselves. So nobody's clicking a stopwatch. Now we go to the blast wave exposure, different type of brain injury. And that's what's not yet been brought into our medical understanding largely. The VA has not yet really understood the effect of blast wave exposure. And in part because the special operations group are a relatively small percentage of all the veterans. So it's a small group of people that have 98% of the blast wave exposure.
Right.
Maybe 99%. In the year 2016, this amazing pathologist in Bethesda, a guy named Daniel Pearl, and his team were looking at brains of men who had been operators and who were dead, obviously, and had been noted to have problems with cognitive functioning, depression, just personality changes. And he did a lot of different things. And then what he eventually found was there was a different type of brain damage. He wasn't finding CTE in these guys. He found something else that's now been named in his 2016 paper, interface astral glial scarring. And his hypothesis, which makes a lot of sense to me, is this is a scarring caused by the shearing effect of blast waves going through the brain. Now, remember, it's also going through all the other muscles in the body, the lungs, the organs, everything. So we don't even know what it's, what it's doing to the whole system. So right there, we've got two types of brain damage that are occurring. Okay, so what does that mean? We don't know. We don't really know. We know guys show cognitive deficits, like they don't think clearly, their memory is impaired, their concentration, their ability to focus is disrupted. If you do IQ tests, the IQ gets a little bit lower as measured in people with TBI effects. It seems sometimes that seems to rebound, sometimes it seems to get better over time, but we don't really understand what or why. Headaches are a common problem, and that could probably be from other things. That could be from physical injuries to the neck and back, but pretty good reason to think that that's a TBI effect as well. So
and what's interesting
there.
What's interesting is, sorry to cut you off there, but when as you're sitting there talking about all the potentiality, I'm just going through in my mind all the different phases of training, right? Whether we're doing field expedient claymores and we're sitting, 16 meters behind those and clacking off 16 of those, bam, 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 right? Or we're in the housework and we're doing flashbang appreciation where, all the new guys are in one room and all the other senior operators are throwing 10 flashbangs in the room so we understand what it does, and just things like that every single day, or just doing our combatives training and getting drilled in the head by, you're the new guy, so you're going to stand in the box, through every dude to feel what every dude's strength is. And you're getting pounded in the head by these guys that are 6'6" and, 240, and you're taking a full blown elbow, even though you've got the padding on and you're still getting your bell rung. And it's just all the time. It's a natural component. So you just learn to kind of, hey, this is part of it. I just got to live with it. As you start to describe in detail all these signs and symptoms, man, it's just like, it doesn't take a lot to go back and revisit your training pathway and say, oh, it happened there, it happened during rockets, it happened during this, it happened, all these times. So it really is. And for those guys that are still in, guys that have 700-800 combat missions, you just like, holy cow.
Yep.
So
what does it lead to?
Huh?
You want to move on, or you stay on? Yeah.
No, what I'd just like to know is as I read through the paper, and we'll post this paper on our website, and I'm going to get a bunch of other people to post it too. So if you're listening, don't worry, we're going to have that website or this paper on my website at teamfroglogic.com, as well as I'm going to try and get it on some other people out there to support as well too. But and so you said there is a chronological sequence of why you put things in order as this. And so what is the main reason why you put TBI first?
Well, because the brain is the most important organ in the body, right? It's what governs our consciousness. It's what governs who we are. So one of the things that we start to see are people who have essentially lost a sense of who they are. They become confused, depressed. They can't function like they did. We have pretty good reason to believe that many of the suicides that have occurred in the community are from guys that had experienced really dramatic changes that were noticed by everybody around them, but that were not understood. And one of those major changes is neuroendocrine functioning, and essentially hormonal changes. The brain is the center for regulating our endocrine system, the pituitary gland, and so you've got this whole dysregulation of endocrine functioning in many, many guys. And I'm going to lead off with testosterone because that's the one that seems to be at the top of the list. But that's not the only one.
Let me read it real quick because endocrine dysfunction is the next thing. So let me just read this real quick.
Sure.
TBI has a powerful dysregulating effect on the endocrine system. and particularly TBI secondary to blast wave exposure. It is believed that overactivity of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis through acute or chronic stress disrupts the hormonal interaction, including gonadal and thyroid axes, between this region of the brain and the adrenal gland. So explain that a little bit more in depth for us.
Simply put, it means you're probably going to have low testosterone, and your estrogen, your thyroid, your growth hormone, and probably a lot of other things are going to get out of whack. If you have low testosterone, what does that mean for you? Let's just start with that. People tend to think of testosterone as, oh, you won't have much sex drive, and you need high testosterone, to get jacked and ripped. Well, yeah, that's true. But having low testosterone means you're going to be depressed, irritable, you're not going to sleep well, you're not going to concentrate well, you're not going to think like you used to be able to in terms of problem solving. Your friends and family are going to be like, oh, he's not the same guy he used to be. What happened to him? And you're going to think that for yourself. So, like, just right off the bat, if your testosterone is, for a 40-year-old man is the testosterone of an 85-year-old man, we got a problem. And we need to address that problem. And we need to do it all together with looking at the whole panel of endocrine and immune and metabolic functioning data that we can get, and kind of take all that into account. And that takes special expertise. And it takes a willingness to go there. Most you go in to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a social worker or any mental health worker, and you present with all the classic symptoms of depression. Usually you're going to get put on maybe an antidepressant medication, encouraged to come back for psychotherapy. And that's fine. That's great. But that's not targeting the testosterone.
But the real issue is going on. Yeah.
It's not targeting the real issue. Right. And so in most cases, the real issue is never even looked at. Those mental health providers are generally not asking for the endocrine panel to be tested.
How would they even know? How would they even know if they haven't been exposed and they don't understand the magnitude of exposure with special operations guys and their training and what they're experiencing on a regular basis? How would they even know? And I think that's why we're seeing so many guys initiate having these problems going in, and next thing you know, they're walking out of the VA or their doctor with a handful of meds.
Bag of pills. Yeah, a bag of pills. So I would say that's the guys I talk to, that's the first thing I say. Go get a panel. Go get a blood panel done. And don't just settle for, oh, you're fine. Insist on it. Don't let the doctor tell you, oh, you're too young. We don't worry about that in men your age. Don't accept that. And then when you get the results, don't accept, oh, everything's in normal range. Look at the numbers for yourself. Show the numbers to somebody else. Get a second opinion on those numbers. I have a friend who was showing all the classic signs of low T, and I spent several months, imploring him to get it tested. He finally went and got it tested, and he came back and said, "Oh, doctor said it was fine, normal range." I said, "Well, what was your number?"
Right.
He's like, "I don't know." I said, "Go get that number." He came back the next week, says the number was 242. 242. And I said, well, what did the doc say? Because usually anything lower than 300 is I'm not an endocrinologist, but that's kind of what I've always heard should be treated. And his doc said that the threshold was 240. So he was 242 and the threshold was 240. And this is a guy that's not yet even 40.
Wow.
So there's just a lot of ignorance and a lot of bad practice out there. Bad practice habits. It's not ingrained in the mental health providers' habits. It's not even ingrained in primary care, internal medicine docs' habits to look at these things.
Well, why would it be, right? Or we are the anomaly. This lifestyle, this desired exposure, because it really is. I mean, you get hooked on it, right? That drive to be in the mix, to be going overseas, to be doing this job that you experience so much pain to try and be qualified to do, then you finally get to do it. And, the old saying, be careful what you ask for. We've had, two 2 wars and multiple other theaters of conflict going on for 19 straight years. And so, I mean, I don't think we've ever, I mean, you're the historian on this as well, too. I don't think we've ever had this type of exposure before.
Correct. We haven't. And you're being very gracious here. I'm here to tell you this should be part of standard practice, and probably standard practice for every veteran, and standard practice for mental health care providers in general everywhere, working with anyone. How many people are diagnosed with depression and given an SSRI in this country who might have some kind of hormonal imbalance that's never even. Part of the answer is we don't know, but my guess is it's a lot higher than we realize.
Right. Well, let's go on to the next one. So we've got TBI, we've got endocrine issues, and now the next one you guys have listed is sleep disturbance. And let me just read the first paragraph from this. The presence of sleep disturbance among operators is nearly universal. That was the one that got me, man. I mean, I know just we all talk about it, but we don't talk that openly, especially when you're active. Man, are you sleeping? No, man, I ain't sleeping at all, right? And then operators face a number of concerns that put them at risk for problems with sleep, including TBI, headaches, pain, endocrine dysfunction, psychiatric illness, being on guard or hyper-vigilant, and alcohol abuse. And I wish you would have had some drug abuse in there too on that one, but all of which negatively affect circadian rhythms. Deployment schedules and mission requirements, traveling across time zones and shifting sleep schedules, also disrupt normal sleep-wake cycles. Tell me a little bit about what you guys are seeing with this.
Well, so right there's a list of about 10 things that can interfere with sleep. And if you have any one of those things, you might not sleep very well. Now you've got 10 of them, so good luck. Good luck catching some Z's. Now sleep is much more important than we used to understand. It used to be, you're sleep deprived, shrug it off and push through it. I mean, plenty of people do that in their work. Many of us work a lot of hours, and there's nights where we don't get much sleep. There is a wide variety of sleep needs, of course. My grandmother only needed 3 nights of sleep, and that 3 hours of sleep at night. That was about all she needed. She was bright and energetic the next morning. But most of us need 7 to 9 hours to feel good. We now know that our brain, when we're asleep, our brain is consolidating memories. Mm-hmm. It's cleaning itself. We have a lymphatic system in the brain that actually takes out the trash, carries out the toxins. And if we don't get that sleep, that doesn't happen, and it builds up. So when you don't sleep, you don't feel good, and everything flows from there. So one of the ironies is many of these things that cause sleep impairment are then made worse by the sleep impairment. So you literally have a vicious cycle.
Wow.
If you're depressed, you might not sleep. And then if you don't sleep, you get more depressed. If you're in pain, that'll interfere with sleep, but not getting enough sleep increases, the vulnerability to pain, and on and on and on. So sleep is one of the most important things for our health that any of us can be doing. And it's truly and deeply affected in 100% of the guys that I've worked with.
Yeah. I mean, it's like when you use the term universal, that's for sure. I mean, every guy I know all struggle, and then there's always the, as you leave the teams, it begins to compound itself as well too, right? Because you're not as working as hard. You're not, your body's not as good as shape. You're not, all these other things, and it just begins to really, compound on itself and gets away from you before you know it. And then, and then the booze and the drugs start in and everything else, and you're just chasing those few hours of sleep. And the irony in this, I believe, and really intensifies the dysfunction amongst us, is the fact that going through training, you're taught, and it becomes a very significant piece of our cultural identity, that you don't need sleep, right? You went through Hell Week. You were up for, essentially 90 straight hours with no sleep, getting pummeled. You don't need sleep. It's overrated,
Survive. So look at it. Yeah, it's overrated. Right.
which is just
well, then go to mission. Then go to a mission set. You might be all day doing something, and then something pops, and you got to be up all night on the mission. So there's times where there's training, and then there's missions where there's just no choice.
Well, you think about the guys from the tier 1 units, and I remember back in the heyday, 06 to 2011, where I'm getting, my friends are coming back and they're doing these 90-day pumps, and they're doing 90, 92, 94 straight ops in 90 days. And you think to yourself, my God, first off, how can anybody live up to an op tempo and be able to function efficiently for that? And then that's where you begin to recognize the true outlier nature of those units. But it's just like, man, that becomes this almost you're what are you? You're lying to your brain function, right? You're like, oh, I can do this, and it's not going to affect me. And then these guys, they do 5 straight years of this, and then all of a sudden their brain starts shutting down, right?
Yeah.
It's a shame. All right.
Well, there's another piece to this, which is the very next one on the list, which is the obstructive sleep apnea. A fit 40-year-old man, 35-year-old man, 45-year-old man generally isn't going to have sleep apnea. You don't see that typically. It's unusual. Usually men with sleep apnea are at least middle-aged, if not elderly, typically a little overweight or a lot overweight. We're seeing sleep apnea, obstructive sleep apnea, at rates that are just enormous. Maybe, I'm going to guess 50 to 70% of the guys I know have.
Wow.
Many of them get that when that gets, and that's officially only diagnosed via sleep lab, right? So what's the treatment for that is a CPAP. That's a prescription. It's a medical prescription for a device. Yep. And some of the guys get those, and they're just like, wow, it was a game changer for me. We have a friend, you and I have a mutual friend who told me once, he said, if I got sent to a desert island and could choose 5 things to take with me, one would be my CPAP and the other would be a solar panel to charge it. That's how important it was.
Well, I mean, you and I, we hear these stories where guys, for the first time in 15, 20 years, they get sleep, and how it changes their entire existence, man.
Yeah, right.
And you're like, well, wait a minute. Why is there not a proactive approach? Why aren't guys getting CPAP machines while they're operating, while they're in these environments where the air quality is shit, or they're under this duress or whatever, they're exposed to these blast injuries? Why aren't there chambers? Why don't there portable chambers that you put a guy in after he's been concussed or blown up in a mission, so you can have that recovery take place in real time? It's mind-boggling.
Right.
All right.
I guess the thing I would say to everybody out there listening, think about how you feel on your worst nights of sleep. Think about how you feel the next day and how you function. And then think about feeling that way every day.
It sucks. I'm here to tell you, man, it sucks for sure. Oh, man.
Right on.
All right, let's go to the next one. And this is something that, and I see a lot, because, I do a lot of work with professional athletes and collegiate athletes and stuff. And this is a big one, right? And this is kind of the one that people blow off as well too, as they just chalk it up as hey, oh, this is just part of it, right? This is just, hey, if you want to do this, you're going to have chronic joint pain, orthopedic problem and headaches, right? And what a lot of people just can't comprehend, and I, so often when I'm giving a speech and I'm describing in detail, a particular evolution or a series of evolutions we would experience in BUDS or SQT, or even in, your workups, and people are like, why the hell would you do that to your body once, much less repeatedly, over the course, where it's just, that's the standard of the impact you place on yourself. And they just can't fathom the reasoning behind it. And I, you know, and I mean, I don't know a single guy that doesn't have, you know, some kind of back pain, lower back pain, especially shoulder pain. I mean, we have ungodly amounts of shoulder issues in the teams, and then, you know, knees, joints, hands, everything. It's just, it's substantial. Now, why did you want to include that in there?
You just said it. It's substantial. It contributes to it makes everything complicated. When you're hurting, you can't move. You can't exercise. You can't sleep. You can't be the same person you are when you're not hurting. Pain is an enormous burden, psychological burden. You know, if you're hurting and you're not sleeping, you're not going to be a good husband, a good father, a good co-worker. You have trouble keeping up with other things. Pain is one of the biggest distractions that's there. And then what do people do when they're in pain? They look for relief. Anything that can bring relief. And so what do we offer for pain relief in our society? What kinds of things do people seek out? Well, one thing is opioids, which carry some long-term problems, as you know. Probably some other types. I mean, I won't even call that substance abuse. That might all be legitimate prescriptions that are prescribed and managed carefully by doctors, but those still bring other problems with them. And then you have the stuff that's not prescribed, the alcohol, the other drugs, the stuff that some people consider recreational, but many guys, that's their health regime. You know, that's their health plan, is to drink a cocktail of stuff a couple times a day and make it through the day and get to the next day.
Well, it's not just that. It's you go in and you've got the, you know, the emotional distress. So they give you the antidepressants, and then you go in and you've got chronic back pain and knee pain. And so then they give you the opioids, and then you can't function. So you go get a prescription for Adderall so you can stay focused through all that stuff. And then on top of that, you're a functional alcoholic, and you're still in this intense, you know, you don't have the intensity of the work anymore. So guys are seeking out and they're going towards the hard stimulants that are available out there. And so you just get on this roller coaster of pharmaceuticals, man. And that's the real thing. And that's the next one you got down here is substance abuse. And what really just chaps, you know, which really has got me angry, you know, because again, you know, just lost another guy, overdosed. I just heard about recently. I lost my friend Gabe, overdosed back in August or September. I think it's August. You know, my biggest mentor in my life drank himself to death. I have another close friend on the team that drank himself to death. You know, this is now, and it's not, I mean, my buddies from MARSOC, my buddies from the agency, my buddies from the Special Forces, from Ranger Battalion, they're all telling me that friends of theirs are one of the main components of their suicides. It has to do with their addiction and their substance abuse problems. But yet, it's like we don't want to bring it to the forefront. It's not having shining this light on it. Like we're putting the light on TBI, or we're starting to. Obviously, the light is on PSD, but man, here's this huge component of that's rooted in our culture, right? Special ops guys, man, biggest drinking man's club in the world, and other things. And we have this mentality, but nobody wants to make this a focus issue. Why is that, Chris?
Well, I think you know better than I, but what does it mean for command to say, hey, we're concerned about substance abuse? What does that mean? What are the policies of the Army and the Navy and the Special Forces commands? What are the policies of the Marine core units and the intel group branches and units. What's their perspective on this from a policy perspective?
Well, I think it's always been, the whole concept of liberty is acutely tied to the decompression, right? And if you're going to send people to war, there's an expectation that there's a decompression phase, either pre-phase, you're going to war, you go out drinking with your buddies, everybody's cheering, your family members, your wives, your kids, yeah, hoo-yah, last party, even the workup, there's party. And then you come back and it's like, all right, let's blow off some steam before we have to reintegrate. And then you reintegrate and man, you're still trying to cope. So you're still drinking heavily to try and manage all this other shit. Because when you're active, you're not going in and telling your command, hey, I'm struggling with TBI. I'm struggling with sleep apnea. I'm struggling with endocrine issues. I'm struggling with this. I've got these emotional imbalances. Oh, and by the way, I'm drinking half a bottle of Jack a night just to get to bed. No, nobody's going to say that because they're going to take you offline in 30 seconds. So it becomes this shame and this guilt affiliated with trying to manage this on your own.
And when you're active duty, is there any way you can get into trouble by drinking too much?
Oh my God, day in and day out. I mean, I parts of my career were ultimately destroyed by the fact that I drank too much, for sure. And I see it all the time. I mean, some of the guys that I know, some of the greatest operators this country's ever produced, at times in their careers really suffered from this type of thing because.
So accidents, legal issues for sure.
Everything.
Messing up for sure. Off, domestic violence or other things that might be related to alcohol. But let me ask you this question. Were you ever given a breathalyzer while you were in the service?
No, never.
Did any command ever ask you to do any kind of assessment to see how much alcohol was in your bloodstream at any point in time?
No, I mean, there was random drug tests for sure that were done.
That's my point.
Yeah.
That's my point right there. Random drug tests. But they weren't looking for alcohol.
No, certainly not. No, alcohol was the.
What were they looking for?
Well, they were looking for marijuana. They were looking for cocaine, crystal meth. They were looking for steroids. They're looking for.
So what happens when somebody pops positive on one of those tests?
Well, I think every case is.
What's the tolerance level for that?
Well, when I was in, I mean, lots of guys would, there were cases where guys, you'd be busted down, you sent to the fleet, you come back maybe, or you change commands or whatever, they try. But, over the last however many years, there's been at a certain point, there's a zero tolerance, right? Like I have one friend who got positive and they kicked him out. The guy ended up committing suicide because he lost his identity and his career. So instead of saying, hey, whoa, we've got a bigger issue here and let's help this person try and manage this, it's like, oh no, you idiot, you can't, you're going against, you got caught, so screw you, you're going against, instead of, oh, why is this guy doing this? Why does he have a need to do this? And does he need help? I mean, there was a story back in the day where there was a guy who got hooked and drove out on the O course and he was high and he was inebriated and ends up blowing his brains out on a O course. And you wonder, hey man, what if there was a program that's saying, wow, you're really under stress. We're doing this to your brain. We're doing this to your psychology. We're changing how the state, this hyper-vigilant state you're living in. Man, why don't you, if you got an issue, come on in. We're not going to hammer you. We're not going to destroy your career. We're not going to we want to help you get clean. We want to help you get sober. You would think they're investing all this.
Right. That's the compassionate approach. That's the approach that would sort of leave the door at least cracked open for somebody to walk through it and say, I need to take a time out from the work and get myself right and get the care I need. And then be allowed to go back to the work.
Absolutely.
And I think, and I can understand from a commander's perspective why there might be problems with that. But at the same time,
you can't deny
how many
that's
guys,
real.
you can't deny it's real, exactly. And how many guys do you and I know between us, or know of, maybe not know personally, but know of, who probably struggling with massive traumatic brain injury, massive endocrine dysfunction, massive depression, confusion, haven't slept in weeks, turn to or are using alcohol or other drugs as a way of managing their collective allostatic load and the pain from all of that, and end up dying, whether it's accidental or intentional.
Tons. I mean, the numbers are staggering. I mean, that's why our suicide rate in the special operations has tripled in the last few years, you know, and the expectation from not only us for in the community, but from all of you guys that are helping support us, is that it's not going to go the other way, you know, especially when we have all these 9/11 babies that retire with 20 straight years of combat. And now all of a sudden, you know, they've got to reintegrate into a society that's pretty fatigued with war and also pretty fatigued with the recognition that veterans are struggling. Hey, you signed up. You did this. This is you chose to go down there. And what are we really doing in Afghanistan? What are we really doing in Iraq? It hasn't been a real war since 2011. You know, this is by your command's choice. It's by the warmongers and politics and all this. And you're just like, well, wait a minute. I'm just doing my damn job, man. So anyways, that was a little bit of a rant. I apologize for that.
No, it's right on, brother. It's right on.
Listen, before we go on, I just want to take a little break, and I just want to, I'm sorry, I just need to mention my sponsors real quick.
All right. Thanks for the break. A quick word from our sponsors. First off, I want to say, hey, thank you on it. I really can't begin to fully explain to you, Aubrey, and your team how much it means to me that you're a part of my show, but more importantly, how Onnit products are part of my life. I got to tell you, I mean, first right here, their key, one of their biggest products, their anchor product, if you will, Alpha Brain, which is to help support memory and focus. This thing is this little pill I take almost every day is something that has really enhanced my ability to not only subdue my own worries based on all my issues, right, that I've experienced, not only as an athlete, but more so in the special operations, all the traumatic brain injury stuff, whether running rocket ranges or doing breachers courses or being around explosives or just all the different types of impact injuries, as well as blast waves I've been exposed to. Man, this is the product that I turn to every morning. It's such a critical part of my functionality and helping my cognitive alacrity, as well as my ability to remember things. As I get a little older, I'm starting to notice my memory starting to go a little bit faster, which causes some great deal of distress in myself and my family. But with Onnit's help and Alpha Brain product, man, it's really made a significant difference for me. So every morning I wake up, have my glass of water, pop a little Alpha Brain, and I'm set for the day. So if you're interested in improving memory and focus, go over to onnit.com. That's ONNIT.com, and check out this little sucker because I promise you it'll have a very positive impact on how you go through your day in terms of your memory, your focus, and just all around your ability to cognitively function at the highest possible level imaginable. All right, that's this. And the other one that's been a massive help for me because of all, I think, the exposures I've had around the world is Onnit's Total Gut Health, which helps healthy gut flora and optimal digestion. This little packet of pills that I also eat after lunch every day has really helped me, and I've had significant gut problems since I got out of the military. VA doesn't know. My gastroenterologist still hasn't been able to figure out exactly what it is. But what I do know is that when I take Total Gut Health, I have a much better time digesting. I don't have a lot of the other signs and symptoms I typically would have from eating various types of foods. So this has also been a lifesaver for me. That's Onnit's Total Gut Health. Again, Onnit, thank you so much for providing me with these great products, or providing everybody with these in order to maximize human performance, but also for your support with the podcast. I just am so proud and happy to be able to deliver a real heartfelt message in support of the things that you're putting out to the public. So thank you, Onnit. God bless you. All right, and the other one is right here, this big sucker. This is from Wise Company, the very best in freeze-dried foods out there for emergency preparedness. Listen, coronavirus is real. If you are not paying attention to this, then you are literally letting your family down. You're letting yourself down. This is a very real thing, and it is coming to the United States regardless of whether or not you believe it or not. It is coming. Just saw a new article suggesting that Iran had just had another huge outbreak of 50 new coronavirus cases. Italy is having a massive outbreak of cases right now. So it's moving through Europe and it's on its way to America. So listen, if you are not prepared, right, for this next pandemic, then you're wrong. So go over to wisefoodstorage.com. That's wisefoodstorage.com and check out these buckets, right? And you can get a month's worth of buckets. You can get 6 months. You can get 1 year. What I do is we have, for my family, we have 6 months worth of stored food. And this stuff has a 25-year shelf life. It's easy to store. It tastes great. I've tried just about every meal they have. But more importantly, it gives me the peace of mind, right? I know that if somehow, some way this thing goes crazy and we have to go to our E&E extract point or wherever that is, and I'm not going to share that with anybody, that we're going to be able to have enough food in order to support my family of 6, as well as other friends that might participate. And we're going to be able to be ready for this thing, and we'll be able to last until some type of solution or some type of new antibodies are designed and developed to fight the coronavirus. But this is the way that you can move forward in being ready. So head on over to wisefoodstorage.com, put in the promo code Froglogic, and you will get 25% off everything you order, man. Everything on the site, 25% off. Now, if you're going to make an order that could cost you $2,000, you got 25% off. That is a substantial savings in order to save the lives of you and your family. Now, just go over to wisefoodstorage.com, promo code Froglogic, 25% off everything. All right. And the last little tidbit I want to promote is my new anti-bully book. I just posted last Friday a post about the young man from Australia, the young kid who has dwarfism, who essentially was bullied, and his mom filmed this, and the whole world has come to support him. And what I just want to help everybody recognize is that there are a lot of solutions to bullying, and one of them is based on the research I conducted for over 2 years before I wrote this book. And what I have here is my Navy SEAL superhero character, Doc Frog, with his team, Semper Fido, Wiley Wolf, and Hannah Hawk, and they get together with all their special operations missions and abilities and just the legacy of ability to solve hard problems in tough places, and they create this incredible how-to book for an individual being bullied to assemble the right team in order to create the perfect counter surveillance program against the bully, to where then they can go and create a very healthy process to developing an after actions report, or a report that they can give to their school administration, their teachers, their parents, and then on the unfortunate, horrible event, they can go give it to law enforcement too. And with that product, with that after actions product, they will be able to stop bullying in its tracks, as well as lead to an efficient way in order to get that bullying the help they need to stop that type of destructive behavior. So head over to my website at teamfroglogic.com, go to the store and check out Doc Frog's Anti-Bully Manual. And if you're excited about that, head over there. Oh, I got it. hold on, head over there and also get Doc Frog's PT, Physical Training Manual. And this is 12 exercises to help you and your children get going in order to be healthier day in and day out. All right. So that's Team Froglogic. And if you're also interested in hiring me as a speaker, I would love for your contact form. I work with major Fortune 500 companies. I work with teams and organizations, nonprofits, you name it. I'm happy to help spread the Froglogic message to you and your organization. Just simply send me a contact email on the website at teamfroglogic.com. All right, let's get back to the show. Thank you.
Well, I just thanks, Chris, for a little bit of pause. Had to mention our sponsors. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do this show as well as we're able to without them. So much appreciated right there. All right. So we just talked about substance abuse, which ultimately, you know, I think and you think, well, I don't want to speak for you, but there's a component of it that's built in culturally. And then there's also, in terms of access, it's a lot easier to go to your local. If you're feeling depressed, if you're having some really horrific suicidal inclinations, you're not in a good space, it's easy to just go down to the local liquor store or go to a dealer or whatever you're going to do to begin to anesthetize this very substantial problem of depression and suicide, which is the next thing listed on in the paper. Can you talk a little bit about what you've witnessed and the extensive nature of depression, how it's relative to PTSD and TBI in particular, and then, you know, ultimately the suicides that result from it?
Well, we know that TBI can contribute to depression. We know that low testosterone can contribute to, or is a major contributor to depression or feeling depressed if the testosterone is low. Why is there suicides? You know, and I think you got to look at every single thing on the list here. Suicide is never simple. It's never one factor. It's rarely one factor. But if your brain isn't functioning, if you're not sleeping, if you're in a lot of pain, I mean, there are people who commit suicide, not depressed, commit suicide because of pain, chronic, unrelenting pain that's just unbearable. And I mean, and they're true from all walks of life. That's true. So put it all together: the loss, the existential angst, the loneliness in many cases for people who are estranged from families and children, the anger, the hormonal imbalances that they may not even be aware of, probably aren't aware of, the substance abuse, the pain, the headaches, the cognitive dysfunction, and the confusion. All that adds up. That's a nasty cocktail of misery and despair.
It really is.
And then you put on top of that leaving the teams, or leaving the unit, leaving the service, leaving the important, meaningful work that you've been doing for 5, 10, 20 years, and trying to reestablish a new identity, a new purpose in life. It's a hell of a thing.
It's debilitating. It is. I mean, from my own personal experience, it was probably the worst time of my life was the 3 years after I left the teams. I mean, absolutely devastating time period in my life. You know, and I think, you know, everybody, because post-traumatic stress disorder has taken such a cornerstone of our consciousness, our societal consciousness, right? This is why guys are killed. From what they witnessed, they saw something happen downrange that doesn't sit well with them. But the realities are, we're seeing that it is a lot of this identity crisis. It is a lot of this detachment, right, disorder, where you don't feel connected to meaning or true value anymore like you once did, and trying to, and there's no definitive pathway. There's not this one set, all right, you know, our pipeline now is it's a 2-year immersive training pipeline to just be able to be considered to go into a platoon to go do the work a year and a half later after that. So it's almost essentially almost 4.5, 5 years before you ever get to do your job. But yet your last day in the service, man, they give you a plaque, they have a little retirement ceremony, and that's it. You don't get phone calls from anybody anymore. Like, all right, thanks for playing, you're gone.
You're not part of the brotherhood, so to speak, at that point. And that's devastating to a lot of people.
It
It's
is
devastating to anybody to lose their brotherhood, their tribe, their sisterhood.
Well, and that's what we see it throughout all societies and subcultures, right? Anybody that's ever been ostracized or excommunicated or becomes persona non grata in any particular way, the devastating psychological effects of that is substantial.
Well, it is, and let's just say it in even a more simple word: to feel lonely and isolated, to feel alone with whatever problems you have in life. That's a terrible thing, and we did not evolve. Humans as a species did not evolve to be solitary, single individuals. We've evolved through tens and hundreds of thousands of years to be part of a group, a tribe, surrounded by and immersed in a group of people who we live with, eat with, sleep with, party with, kill with, hunt with, raise children with, sing with, dance with, all of that.
And that's why
so much.
It's so fascinating, because our program is the ultimate composite of that, right? Where we become a member of your ODA team, you become a member of your battalion, or you become a member of your SEAL platoon, man. It's the ultimate tribe. And you buy into this with such substantial behavioralism and cognition and the effects of how you feel emotionally connected to this concept, this tribe itself, and then it's gone, man. It's brutal.
Yeah.
Why did you guys? And let me just read a little bit. Let me just read a couple sentences from the post-traumatic stress paragraph. While the relationship between combat and PTSD is widely acknowledged, we found relatively little evidence of this disorder in its prototypic form. That is with fear and avoidance as central symptoms. Virtually none of the operators reported fear or avoidance reactions related to thoughts or cues associated with their combat experience. In contrast, most indicated they enjoyed their combat deployments and missed the action. Nevertheless, because of the large number of traumatic events, it is important to evaluate operators for this disorder. Now, that's fascinating to me, right? That, you have guys that have 300-400 combat missions, and they potentially don't have PTSD from the missions, and it's coming from some other place. What can you explain that a little bit more in detail?
Well, let's back up. Let me say a few things about PTSD, and I've spent my career working with veterans related to PTSD, and I've worked with other populations with PTSD as well. I don't think we really have a good handle on PTSD, and I think a lot of ways it's become a sort of a catch-all diagnostic category to say, you were traumatized, you had this bad thing happen, we're going to recognize the impact of that on you. So if we accept PTSD in that form, then yes, I think every operator I've met has PTSD, and that's if we include the depression, the anger, the worry and rumination, the reactivity to kind of certain types of stressful things. Yeah, maybe they have PTSD, but they don't have what is considered the classics, used to be at least considered the classic symptoms of the disorder, which are somebody who goes through a traumatic experience, and then when there's something that's there to remind them of that, kind of lose control of their ability to manage the fear. So their heart starts pounding, they become extremely upset, and they do escape avoidance kind of behaviors. to get away from the thing that reminds them of the traumatic experience. That's what I don't see in operators. Most operators still enjoy, even years after leaving service, still enjoy going and shooting guns, still enjoy getting together with other operators and talking about what they saw and did. They don't show the pattern of being woken up throughout the night, specifically by nightmares about what they did in combat. I don't see that. I just don't. I do see a lot of things that we might put into that rubric of PTSD slightly different. I talk about, I should have been on this mission. I should have been in that chair on that helo that got shot down. I know several people that weren't on extortion 17 and feel guilty about it when it got shot down. I know one guy told a story about how they rolled out in a convoy one day during daylight, and then there was a long gunfight, and he got into a different seat in a different armored personnel carrier or whatever they were riding in, and the one he had been in got blown up. Nobody survived. Somebody else was in his, that haunted him. I wear a casualty bracelet of a man who was killed in action, and the men that were with him when he was killed they talk about it, or one of them is, I'm very close to talking about, it should have been him. You know, there's that sense of, and then what was the hardest thing for him to do back stateside was to face the man's family.
Survivor's
and I've
guilt.
heard that from guys, survivor's guilt, survivor's remorse. I wish I'd done more. I wish I'd done something different. You know, you've got that old parable of a butterfly wing flaps on the other side of the world, and it changes the course of human history on the other side of the world. You know, that kind of thing. If only I had, yeah, right. And you know, you hear guys say, well, if only I hadn't, you know, stepped over there to smoke a cigarette, or if only I had, you know, leaned on my left elbow instead of my right elbow, the bullet would have hit me, you know, instead of the other guy. The other thing that's interesting about this is one of the things that a lot of guys tune into after their military career is over is regret about not having been there for their family.
Wow.
More. Missing birthdays of children, missing Christmases. You know, I had a mutual friend of ours was out here, spent Christmas with me a few months ago, and he came out with his wife, his lovely wife, his wonderful children. His mother came with him. And one of the things we were talking about was how many Christmases had they spent together? Not very many. This was a special time because they were all together, and that was really cool to be there, and privileged for me to be a part of the family for that week. But also very much aware of this was a new thing for them.
Well, it's such a substantial component of your other family's unit, as well as your own emotional development, right? Is that you can participate in these very substantial, you know, evolutions of growth within your family dynamic. And for us, it's just non-existent, right? I mean, I remember I missed my oldest daughter's first birthday. I was overseas working for the agency, and it was probably one of the most devastating days of my life. Because here I am going, you know, wow, this is my pursuit of whatever this is more important than my daughter's first birthday. And you live with that, and you battle that. And
yeah.
You know, and I've talked to you extensively, like trying to get to that place in your life where you can let that go and say, all right, I can start re-engaging and rehabilitating those feelings right now if I choose to, depending upon, but some guys really struggle with that type of stress, right?
Yeah. One of the very first guys I met, this was years ago, and at one point I thought, oh, I'll do an interview with him. I'll ask him some questions about PTSD symptoms. And one of the things you have to do when you do that is, like, you have to start identifying, well, what are the traumas, right? So, you know, I'm waiting for him to tell me about his thoughts on, you know, one of these combat missions or something like that, or the accumulation of all of them, you know, that sort of thing. None of that bothered him. What bothered him what upset him, what kept him awake at night, was that his wife had asked for a divorce and had initiated a divorce. And at the time, I think they were still in the process. That was the most devastating event of his life that he could point to. Yeah.
And when you look at the statistics for special operations community in terms of those issues, divorce and these emotional issues, and you've got those listed here, a couple down after post-traumatic stress, there's the anger, there's the worry, there's rumination of stress reactivity, and by all means are no small things, I think, for sure. But
I think those kind of go together.
I do too.
Depression, anger, PTSD,
yeah.
worry, rumination, not having the capacity to deal with as easily with the small stressors that one would have had 10 years ago is really predominant. And it all gets kind of lumped in together with not sleeping, being in pain, having headaches, not being able to concentrate as well, the hormonal changes. And then you get to the marriage and the family.
And this is a big one.
Community.
This is a big one, because really when after you've departed and you're gone, from the rigors and the schedule of being an operator, and now you're just a regular guy around your family trying to reintegrate to their lives, right? Not them being forced to integrate with yours, but now they become the predominant factor, and many guys they can't work through it. And that's why we have these crazy divorce rates.
And what's interesting is you have the crazy divorce rates while guys are in the service, and some of the marriages that made it all the way through those 20 years, there's a whole new stressor when at the point of retirement or separation. And sometimes marriages that made it through the tough part don't make it through the part that they expect to suddenly be the easy part.
I've got a perfect example. One of a close mutual friend of ours had one of his mentors in a team, went all the way up, command master chief, very prestigious unit, right? 20 some odd years, gets out. They built this immaculate home in an area in the country, beautiful, like 5,000 square foot home with, on 20 acres out in the middle of nowhere, like this dream thing. And 2 months into it, she's like, I want a divorce. You got to get out. And the guy ended up being homeless. This guy ended up being homeless for almost a year after that, living out of his car and parking his car in national forests and bathing in these places or in rivers. And that, and what was amazing, I ended up getting to interact with him during this phase, or right after this phase. He had finally kind of met somebody, got into a rental space, but it was actually a place of greater content for him because he had none of the stressors at all of anything, trying to manage relationships, manage expectations. He was just on his own, free of all responsibility. And it was always very perplexing to me, going, man, you did all this, you served, you gave yourself of all this act. Now you've been reduced to accepting homelessness as your fate. And that blew me away. I was just like, how can this be? And that was one of the first big instances in my recognition. Wow, there's something much more substantial going on, not just with me, but with everybody.
Right. Let's take a moment to talk about the spouses. In fact, let's take a moment to give a shout out to the spouses.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of spouses, a lot of wives who are hanging in there with husbands and loving their husbands and doing everything they possibly can to support and understand. And it's tough. It's tough for them. And think about everything we've just discussed. If you're a spouse and you're the person you love, the person you've chosen as your life partner is suffering from depression, anxiety, anger, headaches, pain, not sleeping, not cognitively functioning, it's miserable. It's really tough on a relationship, no matter how hard you are fighting for it. And then on top of that, as a spouse, that your operator husband has these losses, the losses that continue. So you're aware of all the people that from the community. These are virtually friends and family who've been lost, either through combat, training accidents, overdoses, suicides. There's a burden on the families, the spouses especially, that we just, we don't talk enough about or think about enough. And then, of course, you have the Gold Star wives who have lost their husbands in combat, explicitly.
And their
And I know
children,
several of
their
them.
children who've lost their fathers. I mean, that's a whole nother aspect of this, the fratricide of this operator syndrome.
Yeah. I was talking with a young man recently, 15-year-old, tough kid, smart, doing everything in life that you would want a kid to do. And one of our conversations, he said, I've never really had a chance to be a kid. I've always had to be strong. My dad's been away for 20 years, and so my entire life I've been sort of the man of the house.
Wow.
And that's meant every minute of the day wondering, hey, I wonder if my dad's alive right now. I wonder if my uncles are alive right now, because that's how he understood the men who served with his father to be. And some of them weren't alive. So then there's the funerals that he's been to, the Arlington ceremonies.
Wow.
That's a heavy childhood, and it's that some of our conversation was like, well, when do you get to be a kid?
And what does that even mean? What does that even mean? I mean, is there even a premium on childhood, which is the great irony anymore, because so often operators feel this need to, because they're dealing with the very worst that civilization can offer, and they've taken it upon themselves that this is their mission, is to essentially eradicate evil on the planet. So when they come home, to be able to move into that level of interaction in a childlike state is impossible. And ultimately, I've seen plenty of times that I don't want to call it an insistence, but there's a definite inference. Hey, you need to grow up. Life is hard. You got to be tough.
Yeah,
and it's
get
just
there quickly.
It's crazy. So. I think the family issue plays a massive role in operator syndrome, and I'm really happy that it was a major component of the paper.
Let me just say one more thing, just to
please.
Some of the people I admire, some of the people I know on this planet and admire and respect and love the most are some wives. I'm thinking in particular of about 4 or 5 wives that I know who, man, I tip my hat to them for what they do every single day and what they continue to do. And that includes some gold stars. And some wives who are technically not considered gold stars, but who lost their husbands to suicide.
Yeah. Which is a shame, because they should still be, given that opportunity of being honored that way, because,
100%.
Yeah, it's crazy.
To me, that's a battlefield death.
100%. I agree. Absolutely. So after the marital, family, and community dysfunction, there's problems with sexual health and intimacy. We can obviously, that's the changing of social environments, the stressors of the endocrine issues, the non-sleeping, the lack of detachment, the intimacy issues for sure. As a result of being on guard, which is the next session, or hyper-vigilant. I think that makes a lot of sense to people. But what's very, I think, critical to understand is that what does that do neurologically to live in that perpetual state of hyper-vigilance? What are you guys seeing there?
Well, it's a little bit hard for me. I don't know exactly physiologically, but if you're on guard all the time, that's a lot of your cognitive capacity right there. I've like, for example, I was sitting in a hotel lobby once with a friend, and his eyes kept scanning the room around us. He was aware of everybody coming in, and I could see it. And he wasn't fixating on any one individual person, but he was basically just kind of, he was alert. And a couple of times he lost track of our conversation. And, I even said, that guy over there with the backpack, are you worried about him? And he's like, no, I'm just keeping an eye on him. Just kind of noticing him. But think about it. You walk into a room, you sit down, and the first thing that automatically goes through your head is, where's the exits? What's the plan if something goes wrong? What do I do if this happens over there? What do I do if this happens over there? I mean, that's very adaptive. That's why you guys are those of you who are alive are still alive. Mm-hmm. But you get back into a civilian society where, we're not surrounded by danger literally in every moment. I mean, yes, bad things can happen at any time to any of us, but that takes a lot of capacity to be that vigilant, and it interferes with sleep.
Absolutely.
I know some guys that, we talked about substance abuse, but I know some guys that won't take anything to help sleep because they don't want to be incapacitated if something happens in the night.
Something happens, break in, whatever. Yeah, I know those guys as well too.
I know a guy who his wife describes this, but he acknowledges it's true. If there's an unusual noise in the middle of the night, he's awake in a second. Like, I might hear a dog bark and sleep right through it, or notice it and go right back to sleep. But he's up, walking,
clearing his house,
clearing the house with a gun in his hand.
Yep.
With a gun in his hand. Absolutely. And his wife is like, we've got small children. I don't know if I don't know how awake he really is. Is he sleepwalking? Is this an automatic response kind of thing? And it kind of is. I'm still alive, but
I think it absolutely becomes autonomic. I mean, you can't condition the human mind to be in such a state where, if you're not there, you're going to die or get someone else killed. It's absolutely becomes just a component of your existence.
Right.
It's just an unwinding.
You use the word conditioned, and that's exactly what it is. It's a conditioned response, a deeply conditioned response.
Deep conditioning. That's essentially when you take a look at all these things, and you go down and you see memory, concentration, and cognitive impairments. I mean, i.e., traumatic brain injury, all these other issues, right? The vestibular vision impairments, absolutely a massive component. And then, you get into these challenges of transition from military to civilian life, right? And there's no expectation of that transition when you're going through it. You don't even, what's remarkable is that every other time in your life, you're in this state of long, prolonged assessment, right? If I do this, this is going to help me in my life down here, where we're like, hey, I'm going to go subject myself to the most brutal application of physical, mental, spiritual, emotional pain for this, so I can go to war. And that's all I want to do. I just want to go to war. That's what it is. I've got no real idea or concept of what the effects it's going to have. I have no real idea or concept of what the actual effects of all these different types of exposures is going to do to me. And I certainly can't comprehend combat until I get there. So it's all in this theoretical place that once, through this immersion, that the impact is fast, it's rapid, it's exaggerated, and it's consistent, right? And then all of a sudden it just ends. And now you're in this civilian experience that you really don't understand and that you really don't fit in. And now all these existential issues come into play, right?
Yep.
Talk a little bit about what an existential issue is and why it's so critical to this whole operator syndrome.
Well, existential issues are the things that many people don't think about, that are just kind of taken for granted. But when you really put a lens on them and bring them into focus, they become kind of centralizing points of, holy shit, there's this thing here. And so, for example, I mean, I list several of them here. This is by no means a complete list, but mindset that discounts the future. How do you think about what you're going to be like when in your old age, when there's a very good chance you'll die tomorrow? How many 20-year-old operators or how many 20-year-old trainees going into the special forces think to themselves, you know what? I mean, and this is true of 20-year-olds in general, they think they're going to live forever. But like when you've got a 20-year-old going into buds or going into Ranger selection, is that something that you're thinking about? What is it going to be like when I'm 50 or 70? Of course not. When you're downrange, what's on your mind? What's right in front of you? There's a tunnel vision right to that point, that mission set. And it has to be that.
We call it front sight focus. It's essential. You can't do it without.
It has to be that way. Right. It has to be that way.
Yep.
And now you're out of the service. Now, suddenly, it's a tough shift. I've seen this over and over again. We call this discounting the future. That's actually a phrase from economics, meaning future isn't as valuable as the present. And,
wow.
And for somebody who's not discounting the future, they think of things like, oh, I'm going to eat really, really well so that when I'm 80, I'll feel good. I'm going to save money so that when I'm 80, I'll be financially secure. But if you think you're going to die tomorrow or next week or in a few years, you behave differently. The future isn't as valuable as the present moment. And so how do you get out of that mindset of not discounting the future? How do you get into the mindset of saying, you know what, I'm going to develop a lifestyle right now, today, that will maximize my health, my well-being, my financial security, so that when I'm 100 years old, I'll be good. That's a challenge. That's a real challenge.
It's yeah. I mean, it's every phase of development, right? With the more acceptance that you move into along the way, the farther away you get from that reality, right? Because everything is temporal, right? It's just about the next training cycle, the next deployment, the next mission, right? None of it is this long-term phasic approach where you're like, all right, if I continue along this path, I'm going to lose down this place. It just, you don't even think about that. It's just not even a part of it. And, that's why I was really excited to see you guys put that in there. And when I probably give, I don't know, sit down with 10 kids a year, and we'll give them a talk about, oh, so you want to be Navy SEAL? Are you prepared for, literally, I go down all on the list on here and say, are you prepared? And they're like, what's that? What's that? What's that? And you say, this is part of it. And this is it's scientifically proven now. It's medically proven. This is part of what you will experience. You might be the outlier that doesn't experience the totality of operator syndrome, but you are going to go to a place where you have a sense of impending grief, the survivor's guilt, right? And what you also included in there is the meaning of killing. Can you expand on that a little bit too?
Yeah, this is a slightly underdeveloped idea here. I mean, it's very underdeveloped here. In fact, a good friend of ours, Dan Luna, and I are writing a book on this topic, or we're developing a book on this topic. Think about what we're all taught. The 10 Commandments in this country. We're taught the 10 Commandments. We live in a society that we have a lot of modern luxuries. We don't really have the kind of connection with death and dying and violence and killing that humans have had throughout most of our existence as a species. We don't tend to kill our own meat on a regular basis. We go to the supermarket if we want a hamburger or a steak. We don't tend to die at home. Some people do, but many people die in a hospice or a hospital. Most of us don't prepare our own dead. We have undertakers and morticians for that. So our intimate connection with that death and the process of dying has become somewhat remote. So what does it mean to kill? What does it mean to take a life? Most people in America don't have any real concept of that. How do you take somebody who was brought up with that background, put them into the military, and now they're killing? They're taught to kill. They have to kill. That's part of it. And what many people don't realize in America is how much killing our special operators have done. Special forces, and it's not just killing. It's not just saying, hey, we're going to drop a bomb over there, and some people will die. It's not just, hey, we're going to launch some rockets over there, or we're going to fire some artillery and some people will die. It's, we're going to go into a room of somebody's house and we're either going to capture or kill them. We're going to be standing over them. We're in close quarters. Sometimes it's hand to hand.
Yeah.
It's incredibly intimate.
No, I think, this is.
And I don't have a simple summary comment on that, other than to say when you really go there, it's a really powerful thing.
It's massive.
Yeah.
I believe it's the core root change that it sets guys up for the profound effects that we're seeing, right? Because you're taking, like you just described, you're taking a kid from whatever subculture he's been indoctrinated into, right? Which very few other, if you're from a place where violence is a part of everyday survival, right? Inner cities, certain areas that are more ripe with violence, that cartel-held regions, or where just violence, even you grew up in a household where your father or your mother used to beat you on a regular basis, that kind of domestic violence approach. The overwhelming majority are not exposed to that, and like you said, there's a detachment from death that has really been prevalent in our modern Western society. So, all of a sudden these kids are stepping into this program from day one, where the essence of what your main function and purpose in life is to take other human life. Bad guys, go kill bad guys, kill bad dudes, right? God bless.
Ultimately, it comes down to that, right? Yeah.
And
go ahead. So what does it mean to do that? What does it mean to do that one time, and then sit back and live with that and reflect on that? What does it mean to have done that 10 times? What does it mean to be one of those special operators who's taken hundreds of lives? So many that you don't even know how many you've taken, or you lost count. You lost count after halfway through the first deployment.
You've lost count. Imagine that. Imagine the effects of that on a human. I mean, it's, that I think I really am excited that you and Dan have embarked on this. I think it, God bless Dave Grossman. We interviewed him, Marcus and I, and Wizard interviewed him on, and he's done some really profound work with on killing and on combat. But I think the next generation,
great book.
I think the next generation of this really can rest in where you and Dan take this. So I'm really excited that you guys are going with this. It's going to be phenomenal. All right. The last one that you have kind of here is the fear of developing invisible wounds. And I highlighted a little section here, and it says, the confluence of overlapping and interrelated factors creates a vicious cycle, resulting in a SOF operator with compromised function and impaired ability to transition to civilian life, right? And that's really you've gone far enough deep into the programs or the exposure to combat and being a part of the community to where, I know now it's a very regular concern for guys going, what the hell? All these other guys I see are killing themselves. They're going and they're becoming addicts. They're divorced. They're homeless. I mean, I've heard, 5 or 6 stories about soft guys being homeless now. And now, like, oh my God, am I going to face that? Am I going to reach that? Am I going to have this barrage or this litany of scarring from all these invisible wounds that I feel? And that's I just love that that's included in us. It's powerful, and it
Yeah.
has to be
Yeah.
acknowledged.
Yeah. Yeah. I was 2 years ago, well, in the fall of 2018, I was at the Navy SEAL Impact Forum in San Diego. This is now an annual conference that they're putting on. And it's open to it's open to anybody, really. And I was sitting next to a friend who had retired from the SEAL teams after, I think, a 25-year career in the Navy. And up on the stage was Daniel Pearl presenting his work on blast wave exposure and the astroglial scarring, the interface astroglial scarring that he was finding. And what he presented was a series of case studies. And one of the studies was a guy who'd been a good friend and colleague, teammate of the guy I was sitting next to. And afterwards, and several times, not just that day, but several times since then, we've had a conversation where he said, my friend he seemed so strong. He seemed so powerful. I looked up to him. We worked together for a decade. Could never have imagined him taking his life. Wow. Just incomprehensible to me. And he's like, how many other guys are going to hit that point? How many of the rest of us? Am I going to be is that going to happen to me? Is it inevitable? Is it just like, am I destined to have that type of brain injury and the cognitive dysfunction and despair? And I think that's got to be in the back of the mind of everybody that I talk to.
Well, I think it's definitely coming in the back of everybody, because you can't deny it anymore. You can't lie to yourself saying this is not a very real possibility, depending upon the amount of time I put in, the amount of exposure I have. And even, you might only do 5 years and still go through an experience that's life-altering,
Only. Let's put air quotes around the word only, because only 5 years in the American Special Forces is a lot of allostatic load.
It's massive, right? It's massive. My brothers that are coming out, I've got one buddy in the intelligence world that's, he not only after a exposure in a special operations unit first, but now going on, I don't know, something like 16, 17 years within the intelligence world, operating at the highest level. And it's just like, holy cow, man, and he's going to go another 20 years maybe. And I'm just like, my God, is he going to be okay? And we talk about it when we see each other. It's no longer, hey, what cool guy stuff are you doing? It's, hey, are you taking care of yourself? Are you doing these things? Is your mental health all right? Is your body okay? And it's so, the shift, I think, is happening. But still, and the great irony is you still got truckloads more kids signing up every day for this stuff. I mean, it's just, and thank God. I mean, we need guys, right? We need men and women on the front line. We need them at the tip of the spear. I just hope that, being able to clearly identify this now and what operator syndrome is, and with the help of you and all of your compatriots there that are focused on this, I just hope that we can get to a place where, like you write here, right, and your research and comprehensive treatment programs needed. I put this in here. Programs, and you talk about the uniqueness, right? To meet the unique needs of a soft community struggling with operator syndrome, a uniquely tailored, comprehensive, programmatic approach is likely required and should include systematic data collection to further our understanding of this unique population, right? And what's interesting is your description of how unique each person's evaluation process, each person's long-term care is. and that we can't group the individuals into these collective groups and just kind of rubber stamp this generic training to these guys. Every guy requires a very distinct evaluation of their neurology, their endocrinology, their psychiatry, their psychology, their orthopedics, their internal meds. And you just have this long list down the road. And I'm like, holy shit, man. What places are, who's actually prepared for that? Because I know the VA ain't, man. So I just thank God that you guys are doing this.
Well, I think there's probably 2 points of intervention here that should be talked about and thought about. One is what should the military services themselves be doing, both to minimize the damage, understanding that we can't eliminate the risk and the damage. What can be done to minimize it? What can be done to help guys along the way while they're still active? And part of that is about maintaining operational readiness. You know, you've got a 40-year-old man, 20 years in the teams or in one of the units who might want to serve another 4 years. That guy's a really important asset.
Massive.
A lot of training, a lot of experience, a lot of wisdom is there. So what can we do to extend that the shelf life of our forces? And then to help what can be done as kind of the transition point and the long-term care and treatment and health maintenance, for the long haul for these folks who have done so much for us as a country. And I've had this as an argument many times now where I've been told, where people say, well, we got to help all veterans. And the VA is there for that. Right, fine. No argument. Every man and woman who serve, I salute them and I respect them, and there's admiration and appreciation. Doesn't matter what you did, how long you served. You stepped up, you were there, you were ready, and you were willing. But we're talking about the Special Forces community. We're talking about a community that has experienced very unique things, very unique pressures on their body. Just starting with the blast wave exposure. They need something a little bit different. We don't treat all populations the same. We recognize that children, for example, have different medical needs than adults. We recognize that men and women have different medical needs. And I think we need to get to the point where we understand and can agree that people from the Special Forces community, and I define that somewhat broadly, certainly explosives and ordnance disposal, intel folks, many communication folks working within the community. And some of those folks, if they're from intelligence agencies, don't even have access to the VA because the VA isn't there for them. So what are we going to do as a society to step up and provide the unique types of care for these people who have done so much and now have some unique ways in which they're damaged or maybe damaged? It's probably not 100%. So with that said, one of the things that I encounter a lot is this attitude, and I've certainly gotten it from people within the VA. I've gotten it from folks who were the founders of NICO, National Intrepid Center of Excellence. I've gotten this from some donors. This attitude of, hey, we need to have justice in the world. We need to treat all veterans equally. We shouldn't have special privileges for the people that were in special forces. We shouldn't treat them like Hollywood stars. We should treat them no differently from other people. And I agree, we shouldn't treat them like Hollywood stars, but we should give them what they've earned and need.
Well, I think it's outright ignorance to compare a person that served in the motor pool with a basic indoctrination course and whatever versus a guy that was at JSOC that has done 27 deployments with Delta. There's no comparison. And
100%. Yep.
and it's ignorance to imagine that there is a comparison. Even the guys themselves would not say there's a comparison.
Right.
Willfully say.
And that's not even a judgment that one person is better or more worthy than the other.
Nothing
it's
to do with
say, this person did something unique and is damaged in a unique way and requires some unique services to help them with that. We should give everybody we should give every veteran, every service member what they need, healthy and have a high quality of life.
Amen. Amen. So,
and it's going to be different depending on who they are. So
Chris, as we wrap up here, first off, Bravo Zulu, this is a phenomenal paper. This is, I believe, and you and I have talked about this extensively for years, this is the catalyst for something that's really going to, I think, bring a greater degree of focus. And I think it's also going to highlight the need for more programs to be invented like Synchrony. And like what we're a part of it and you're part of it at Methodist, man, in that very unique
Houston Methodist. That's Houston Methodist Hospital in Houston.
At Houston Methodist Hospital, right? And can you talk just real briefly about what Synchrony is and about the Texas availability and just a little bit about what's going on with where you guys are at and what's happening?
Right, sure. So just real briefly, we have a program at Methodist Hospital in Houston, Texas, and it's through the behavioral health program there. And this is a team of guys I've worked with for many years. In fact, the chair of the department, psychiatrist, who's also a neurologist, is a guy named Ben Weinstein. I've been working with him since probably 1997, 98. So we go way back, and we work together in 3 different settings now. The number 2 is a psychologist named Alok Madan. I've been working with him for 15 years, also in a variety of settings and contexts. So our program, which is pretty new and is underfunded at the moment, is intended to be essentially a concierge program that's an intensive outpatient, meaning it's not a hospital unit, it's not inpatient, but asks the operator to come spend 40, 50 hours a week, and we go through and do every assessment on each of these domains that we can think of that would be useful or relevant or helpful. And it's tailored individually. Some people don't need as much, some people need more. And we'll do that for 1 or 2 weeks with the goal, or 3 or 4 or 6 weeks with the goal of coming up with several things. One is diagnostic understanding in each of these areas.
Yeah.
Some of it is about setting benchmark data like neurocognitive functioning, endocrine functioning that we can look at 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 5 years from now. And then developing a treatment plan and beginning to implement that treatment plan while they're there with us, but then having it as set up and designed so that when they go home to wherever home is, they can implement that treatment plan in their home community. And we aspire to stay in touch with them. So we invite people to continue to have like video conferencing or phone calls with our care providers that they have a connection to already. And we've had one former operator who came back a second time a year later. And what was cool, and maybe this is the hopeful message we want to end with, is his intellectual functioning went up about 10% over the course of that year. His IQ actually went up significantly.
Wow.
Because he was doing better. He got better. He was functioning and feeling and doing much better. He was happy, a year later. Now, this is expensive. Programs like this are expensive. The VA doesn't cover it. The VA doesn't provide it. We can't accept TRICARE or insurance because no insurance covers this type of care. The goal of this care, and the goal of this care is not just to be comprehensive, but to be together so that it's not fragmented. It's not you go that way to get your blood tests and that way on the other side of town to see the sleep specialist and it's all right there. Everybody's at the table, and literally everybody's at the table. So once a week, the treatment team gets together and talks about you and what's happened in this week with you. And they do that with you as well as without you. And so the idea is to be comprehensive and thorough and eliminate that fragmentation.
Which is also a
care.
massive deterrent from seeking help anyways.
It is, and for all of us, but yeah, especially for this kind of syndrome. Now, I will say one other thing. I'll give a shout out to the Texas Veterans Commission. They gave us a grant of $500,000 this past year. So we have some funding right now, small, but we have some funding to treat a limited number of Texas residents, and we're probably well into that funding and that funding period. We're going to work with other folks to raise money this year and to develop our program and to learn from what other people are doing and share what we're doing. So we're just getting started on this journey of trying to be part of the solution.
Well, where can people go to find out a little bit more about it? And I certainly am going to post this paper on my website that in a downloadable way. I'm also going to have see if I can get a bunch of other friends to post this. It's really a substantial thing that will help people be able to diagnose a little bit more clearly and then seek out the help that can address these issues. But where can people find a little bit more about the Synchrony program?
Well, probably the easiest place is to go to the Methodist Hospital's website for the Synchrony program.
Okay.
And there's a I won't call it a fancy website. It's pretty simple, but it kind of lays out what it is and who the clinicians in it are. Some of them, the list all of them, and then there's phone numbers and there's some links at the bottom that people can click on if they want to learn more or look into the possibility of donating a little bit of funding for this. One of the things that I like about the Methodist Hospital is not only are they the #1 ranked hospital in the state of Texas, but they are also a pledge they've made to us is that any donations or any funding that we can raise will go 100% to providing the clinical care. So they don't take any kind of administrative overhead. So we're early in that process. We've been blessed to have a few really generous donors so far who've helped us take care of a few guys. Well, but we're just getting started.
I tell you what, this is, and for all my listeners, I've been involved in helping veterans for the past 8 years. I've worked with a truckload of different veterans charities and veterans outreach groups. And this is the one that I have found that I have the most confidence in. They're doing the best work. Some of the people that have gone down there are close friends of mine. And it has saved their lives. There's no doubt in my mind that their lives were actually saved by the work that Chris and all of his comrades are doing down there. So this is a fantastic program. If you're interested in knowing more, please go to the website, reach out. I'm sure there's a way to be able to make donations to them. And maybe, Chris, what we could do is figure out how to get a better website up and running here pretty soon, and to where we can start raising money in a different way. As you know, I'm going to hold a fundraiser in Florida here for y'all in a couple months. But if you want to also know more about it, you're interested in helping, then go ahead and send me an email at teamfroglogic.com in our contact thing. Just fill that out. Be happy to send you. We've got a nice PowerPoint presentation on it that describes it. I'll be able to send you a copy of this paper if you'd like. That's contact me at teamfroglogic.com. All right, my man. Hey, this was exactly what I think people needed to hear. They needed to understand what operator syndrome is, and thank you and so much for putting this out, brother, and doing what you're doing, man.
Oh, well, thank you, my brother, for having me on and helping me. I mean, we've really been kind of partners in this, you and me and a bunch of other people whose names are not listed on this paper. I mean, a lot of folks have contributed to this work. So thank you.
Maybe next time we'll have you on and we'll actually go through some of the, break down a couple of these and actually talk about treatment and what are some healthy components of treatment, what's available out there, what have you guys seen that work. So if they can't get to Methodist with you guys to the Synchrony program, then at least they could probably search out and find some places to get the help too.
Yep.
All right, my brother. God bless you, man. Love you. Talk soon.
Love you too, man.